Reflections. A Theology of Self-Assertion and Biotech Enhancement. Excerpts from Being Human in a Technological Age, Rethinking Theological Anthropology by Kevin O Farrell.
You walk into this room at your own risk, because it leads to the future. Not a future that will be, but one that might be. This is Mr. Romney Wordsworth, in his last 48 hours on Earth. He's a citizen of the state, but will soon have to be eliminated, because he's built out of flesh, and because he has a mind.
You've been under investigation, Mr. Wordsworth, for the mandatory period of 1 year and 11 months. You're found to be obsolete. The purpose of this hearing is to make a finding in the matter and make a sentence accordingly. Do you understand that, Mr. Wordsworth? Your occupation, Mr. Wordsworth?
A librarian.
A librarian. Having to do with books.
Yes, sir. Books.
Since there are no more books, Mr. Wordsworth, there are no more libraries. The field investigators in your sector have classified you as obsolete. Your rights are as follows, Mr. Wordsworth. You are to be liquidated within a period of 48 hours. You are obsolete.
For the time being, cyborgs are not yet in space. But on Earth, some people have already started to incorporate technology into their bodies to acquire enhanced capabilities.
Now that I'm a cyborg, I don't feel closer to machines or to robots. I feel much closer to nature and to other animal species. Many people believe that becoming technology will separate us from nature. To me, it's quite the opposite. Now I feel a closer connection to nature because I can sense ultraviolets and infrareds. I feel much more closer to other animal species like insects because I also have an antenna, and also I can connect to space through the internet. So I feel that technology is allowing me to feel connection to reality and to Earth and to space that I didn't have before.
The goal in the very long term is to be 100% artificial and leave the planet, right? We're number one, we're past the load-bearing capacity of our planet, and we could design ourselves in a much more efficient and less impactful way and go and travel the stars and see everything there is to see. I think that most human beings want to be peaceful explorers, to go out into space and interact with other things and interesting stuff. And the vessel we're in now, the human body, is not designed for doing that. It's not designed to be moral. It's not designed to live long enough. It's in no way designed for the goals of our future. And so I don't see a reason why we don't change the vessel.
Ever since humans invented computer chips, we have dreamt of plugging them into us, plugging us into them. Currently, electronic devices are implanted to treat medical conditions. But one day technology will do more than just bringing us back to normal. It will enhance us, giving us more strength, new senses, and maybe even more intelligence, turning us into cyborgs. Scientists are more cautious, but some of them too dream of augmenting the capabilities of the human body.
I think in 100 years, we would not even recognize the body. Our views today that we hold so strongly on what the body is will seem so limited and stagnant and ignorant.
I think that our technology begins to seamlessly enter us, and we begin to seamlessly enter our technology base. I think that the fusion of the man-made and the synthetic and the organic is the future.
You sense something something that you didn't know was there because of your enhancement, and that's where you have this kind of wake-up moment, and you're like, I'm blind. I'm way more blind than I think I am, right? There are things going on around me, patterns existing in space that I'm interacting with all the time, and I do not have the hardware to experience it. And I thought to myself, wouldn't it be nice if we could be that powerful, if we could be the robots?
These brain-computer interfaces are still connected to wires and are only used in animal and human clinical trials.
We really are at a point where you can begin imagining in 10 or 15 years, you could have many very small objects that are continuously giving you the state of your nervous system, the state of your glands, the state of some internal organs, and possibly putting information in a limited way back into these systems. And that, I think that is really the frontier of the next 40 years.
But today, the brain is still quite a mystery. If scientists one day should succeed at mapping the brain in all its complexity, the possibility of human enhancement will become much more real. In theory, we will be able to design ourselves with practically no limitation.
Human enhancement technologies are certainly a talking point in contemporary moral theology, and for good reason. The rapid development of new enhancement technologies is unprecedented. From human genetic engineering to neural implants, the once thought impossible is now becoming possible. In the active attempt to improve human capacities, performances, dispositions, and well-being beyond the traditional scope of therapeutic medicine, enhancement technologies present questions concerning what it means to be human and what status is afforded to human biological nature. Enhancements are, unsurprisingly, a topic of heated debate, with approaches to the topic being as varied as the conclusions reached by those who engage it. There are movements that vigorously embrace the development of enhancement technologies, celebrating them as a positive step into the future of humanity. And there are movements that sharply oppose these developments, claiming that enhancements do not actually enhance human experience, but only distort it.
Teenagers are spending time in a park, laughing, crafting, just talking. It's only unusual because there isn't a single smartphone in sight. They're part of a small but growing group of Brooklyn students who formed the Luddite Club, named after a 19th century movement opposing industrialization.
During COVID, I kind of looked at my screen time and I was like, wow, I'm spending more than half of my time awake on my phone. Something needs to change.
This video presents a modest attempt to add to this conversation on enhancement technologies by thinking alongside Dietrich Bonhoeffer, whose mode of engagement offers a helpful lens for considering what it means to be human in light of enhancement technologies. The choice to engage Bonhoeffer may seem strange, given that his writings have reached or are approaching their centenary. Some may thus consider his writings outdated, given the technological developments that have emerged since Bonhoeffer's untimely death in 1945. Nevertheless, Bonhoeffer's voice remains incisive and remarkably relevant for interrogating enhancement technologies. This, in part, stems from how enhancement technologies were not a fantasy in his era, but were already normalized, evidenced through the widespread consumption of the methamphetamine, Pervitin, which increased human endurance and concentration beyond what is typically expected. More importantly, Bonhoeffer's engagements with technology remain incisive for their ability to interrogate the technological rationale that fosters the continual development of new technologies such as enhancements. While technologies adapt and develop, the technological rationale operative today has been largely continuous since Bonhoeffer's age, and Bonhoeffer's unique contribution is his robustly theological disruption of this rationale. As Daniel Trier suggests, Bonhoeffer's sporadic engagements on technology remain relevant as apocalyptic proverbs, which offer a particular mode of theological engagement that suggests an imaginative way forward in a technological age. Indeed, it is telling that other contemporary scholars continue to find Bonhoeffer to be a fruitful interlocutor in formulating a theological response to the challenges of emerging technologies. In considering Bonhoeffer's contribution to the question of enhancement, this video moves in 3 stages. The first section explores how metaphysical approaches to considering what it means to be human in light of enhancement diverge from the common approach of bioethicists and agencies that develop these enhancements, such as the United States military wing, DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. After observing how the approach of bioethicists and agencies that develop enhancements bypasses the metaphysical approach, the section concludes by articulating why Bonhoeffer's non-metaphysical approach is helpful in considering what it means to be human in a world come of age. The second section follows Bonhoeffer's argument in his 1932 lecture, The Right to Self-Assertion. This offers a concrete example of theological reflection on what it means to be human in the technological society of the West. The final section shifts to consider how Bonhoeffer's approach outlined in Section 2 offers concrete guidance in considering what it means to be human in light of enhancement technologies.
We are going to talk about the biggest war ever fought in biotech, and it is not from drug discovery companies. It is not from AI companies. It is not from any other biotech companies or biosimilar companies. The biggest war which will be fought in biotech, where every biotech, tech bio, and IT company will come together to fight, will be human brain.
A common approach to combating the rise of enhancement technologies is to engage in metaphysical debate. One first establishes the nature and limits of the human qua, humanity, and then one engages in substantive reflection on the limits, proper uses, and benefits of enhancement technologies. In this way, one first engages with the question of what it means to be human before considering the question of enhancement. One noteworthy work that displays this approach is the edited volume, Human Dignity and Bioethics, which emerged from the President's Council on Bioethics, formed under the Bush presidency of the United States of America. While not every essay in the volume epitomizes this approach, many of the essays display this approach by first considering what constitutes human dignity in itself before considering how this affirms or limits technological interventions on humanity. For instance, in Patrick Lee and Robert P. George's essay, The Nature and Basis of Human Dignity, the authors used the bulk of its space to delineate the nature and uniqueness of human dignity over against other animal life, before briefly considering how various technological interventions can impede a human's humanity. Other works protest against the interventions of enhancement technologies by reasoning from the completedness of human nature as enunciated in the doctrine of creation. In this theologically inflected metaphysical approach, theologians emphasize that normative status attaches to human nature as that which exists apart from intentional human action, and subsequently suggests that this nature becomes determinative of the types of biological interventions invited upon the human body. Oliver O'Donovan gestures toward this approach in his seminal work, Begotten or Made, stating, Christians should at this juncture confess their faith in the natural order as the good creation of God. To do this is to acknowledge that there are limits to the employment of technique and limits to the appropriateness of our making. These limits will not be taught to us by compassion, but only by the understanding of what God has made, and by a discovery that it is complete, whole, and satisfying. And this understanding, according to O'Donovan, extends to the completed character of the human qua humanity theologically understood.
By summoning all the dark powers, I will infest the spirit of man so that he uses his science and logic to destroy himself. What havoc I will raise. Turn brother against brother. Greed and avarice shall prevail. And those who do not hear my words shall pay the price. I'll teach man to use his machines. I'll show him what distorted science can give birth to. I'll teach him to fly like a fairy. And I'll give the ultimate answer to all his science can ask.
It is curious to note that bioethicists simply do not find this metaphysical mode of argumentation persuasive. For most, the neutrality and plasticity of human biological nature is a given, thus already providing warrant for radical enhancement. While this does not necessarily lead to the pursuit of transhumanism or posthumanism, it certainly avoids metaphysical argumentation on enhancement. As Gerald McKinney argues, there is an important difference between change to human nature, which remains human, albeit in an altered form, and changes of human nature into something else, as in transhumanists or post-human scenarios in which human beings become something other than human. Indeed, advocates for enhancement often bypass metaphysical debates on the nature of humanity by bursting those limits through enhancement itself, only then asking questions about what it means for the enhanced human. Once the limit has been passed, it is then that one engages in fresh reflection on what it means to be human.
There should be rights for futurist people that want to do things to their body with technology, and also maybe for future beings like artificial intelligence or robots that might have consciousness someday.
I'm a presidential candidate. I'm controversial as it is. I speak about transhumanism. I want to lose my humanity and become a machine. The future is not biology. Biology is frail. Biology is like the dinosaurs. It's not very effective. You know, if you were going to create a perfect human being, you wouldn't create one with biology. You wouldn't create a machine that eats or drinks or that has to go to the bathroom. I mean, these are flaws in a system of creating a strong, perfect, godlike entity.
Consider, for instance, the work of the United States military agency DARPA. The military agencies behind well-known technologies like drones, GPS, and most famously the Internet. DARPA is known for bursting boundaries. It wants to develop new technologies without hindrance. As one DARPA official said, "We try to find ways to say yes, not ways to say no." And this boundary crossing extends into DARPA's investment in super soldier projects. For the past few decades, DARPA has sought to achieve superhuman performance that transcends the limits of human biology. One paradigmatic example is the project Continuous Assisted Performance, or CAP, which attempted to create a 24/7 soldier who could stay active without sleep for up to a week.
Future soldiers may march longer, carry heavier gear, and be more mentally sharp thanks to DoD-funded research into what's known as the Warrior Web program.
An example of where this might benefit a soldier would be if they're doing a very long duration, physically demanding task where they require a lot of endurance. By having a suit that is providing physical assistance, they're able to maintain their level of physical performance over a much longer duration.
The suit has pulleys and gears designed to prevent and reduce injuries caused by dynamic events typically found in the warfighter's environment.
These physical augmentation technologies have the ability to provide just a reduced physical workload during the very high demand tasks that these soldiers do.
One of DARPA's more impressive achievements is the development of a brain-controlled prosthetic arm. This technology has been used in various ways. It has, on the one hand, been given to the disabled to assist with their mobility and performance in day-to-day life. On the other hand, it has been attached to soldiers without disability so they can exert strength until the battery runs dead. It is a technology that can easily be weaponized, blurring the line between therapy and war. The importance of highlighting DARPA's work is twofold. First, DARPA's work has real public effect. Much of its work has transformed both warfare and modern society without much or any recourse to metaphysical debate. And yet, secondly, it also has a real effect on how we imagine what it is to be human. Consider the language of superhuman performance. This phrase gestures towards an imagining of what the human could be tomorrow and thus pursues it. This imagining does not occur in a vacuum. Rather, it is formed in part by previous technological achievements and imaginings. The testimony of Geoff Ling from DARPA illustrates this point. Your brain tells your hands what to do. Your hands basically are its tools, okay? And what was a revelation to me, we are tool users. That's what humans are. A human wants to fly. He builds an airplane and flies. A human wants to have recorded history, and he creates a pen. Everything we do is because we use tools, right? And the ultimate tools are our hands and feet. Our hands allow us to work with the environment to do stuff, and our feet take us where our brain wants to go. The brain is the most important thing. This discovery leads Ling to ask himself, how can I liberate mankind from the limitations of the body? What is noteworthy is that Ling reasons from and considers the activity of human beings in the here and now, thus avoiding metaphysical speculation on the meaning and purpose of humanity. Ling finds it unnecessary to move behind or beyond this technological human in imagining what it can mean to be human tomorrow.
Imagine maybe you really like weed or something, or whatever your drug of choice is, and you do it, and then you have to go back to normal life. You stop doing it, go back to normal life. Normal life kind of sucks. And so it's the same idea. It's like you're on performance-enhancing drugs, you go back to being natty, it sucks so bad. I can imagine. That's why I'm sure you recommend
never go back to natural. A day natural is a day wasted. The human experience is very short. Why would you waste your limited time on planet Earth being a mediocre natural, losing at everything you try?
Instead of instinctively protesting against Ling's rationale, the rest of this video explores the benefits of this form of reasoning on what it means to be human while still finding theological grounds to interrogate the content of enhancement rationales. It is here that Dietrich Bonhoeffer's approach is advantageous. What is beneficial in Bonhoeffer is a mode of theological reflection that mirrors Ling's attentiveness to the historical human being and their activity in considering what it means to be human. This comes through in Bonhoeffer's late musings on A World Come of Age. What is laudable in this concept is how Bonhoeffer appraised the shift away from metaphysical and religious concepts of God as positive insofar as it looks for God's activity and presence only in the full historicity of the here and now. In other words, this shift is not to be lamented, since it holds fresh theological promise, particularly in considering what it means to be a human come of age. By fastening attention on the historical human being in their full worldliness, Bonhoeffer explores different ways to imagine and practice our humanity today in relation to emergent technologies. Bonhoeffer never describes the human in an ahistorical manner in these late musings. He rather begins to discern what it is to be human only in the full worldliness of their lives. Bonhoeffer thus gestures toward a particular mode of engagement, rather than offering a full-blown account of humanity or technique, while having direct implications for both. With this in mind, the next section will engage Bonhoeffer's 1932 lecture, The Right to Self-Assertion, that illustrates a concrete attempt to answer what it means to be human in a technological age. Bonhoeffer delivered his 1932 lecture on the right to self-assertion at the Technical College in Berlin, where he served as a chaplain. The context of the lecture is important for understanding it. At the time it was given, national unemployment in Germany was around 30%, and it hovered around 50 to 60% for recent graduates. Bonhoeffer uses this lecture to speak directly to these students' dire future prospects, addressing its challenges with a sense of urgency, since he sees it threatening their own humanity. Speaking to the high unemployment levels, Bonhoeffer says, "In the job market, basically everything hinges on one question. Who buys people? People have become like goods, which are devalued by the massive scale. This devalues the individual and the species." Converse to what enhancement technologies promise, Bonhoeffer sees the present economic situation as devaluing human life by turning them into commodities. Bonhoeffer then speaks directly to this economically defined human being. This opening gesture sets the tenor for the lecture insofar as Bonhoeffer continues to move from this historically situated individual towards the question of what it means to be human. We reach humankind in no other way but by the historical path through the individual and the community. It is this bleak picture that raises the central question of self-assertion. That is, the question of how an individual or a community can assert themselves over against others, for example, in the job market, when there are 1,000 others who suffer the same conditions. In moving towards an answer to this question, Bonhoeffer rehearses two ways that humans have answered it since these illuminate the present situation. First, it is the way of India, where humans assert themselves through suffering. The dogma of India is that everything is one, entailing that to inflict harm on nature or other humans is merely to harm oneself. Therefore, to suffer from nature is an act of passive resistance that paradoxically reveals that the soul is stronger than nature, thereby overcoming it. The second answer is by what Bonhoeffer calls European American civilization. Instead of suffering nature, humans master nature. They conquer and extract life through war and the machine. War seizes life from other humans. The machine seizes life from a threatening environment or nature. The two are not identical, but they operate in close proximity, reflecting a particular mode of thought that cannot be arbitrarily separated in theory or practice. They share an intellectual structure and significance. and it is thus unsurprising when their paths cross in modern warfare. While the machine is not directed against humans, it has nevertheless entered the sphere of war in the deliberate service of destroying human life. Interestingly, in this Bonhoeffer does not see the machine being weaponized, but war being mechanized in the way that it treats the human as nature that is destroyed for life. The machine has made war impossible, according to its machine's reality. In a sermon delivered 2 months before this lecture, Bonhoeffer makes a similar connection between technology and economics, arguing that technology and the economy have become automatic powers that threaten to destroy human beings. They set themselves up on high, and their demons have become the gods of our time. While economics is not referenced in this lecture, the above quote clarifies how Bonhoeffer sees the pursuit of self-assertion directly affecting the economic situation of those he is addressing. War and machine are not neutral in their relationship to economics. They rather paradigmatically display the destructive drive that the technical students are witnessing and will soon experience. Bonhoeffer further suggests that the war and the machine are not separate from Western society or persons. It is the life and fate that European Americans are born into and have been conscripted into serving. This life means, in the most essential sense, killing. We all stand in this life. We have all apparently decided to affirm this fate, whether consciously or not. In any case, the decision has been made, and now the task is to understand what we have thereby done. In Bonhoeffer's later works, this concept is reflected in his discourse about the acceptance of guilt. It is the acceptance that one can never maintain innocence within political life, but is always complicit with and induced to act in accordance with the powers and destructive drives of a given age. It is this insight that Bonhoeffer finds promising insofar as it contradicts the dominant logic that life is taken rather than passively received. Through our birth, our life is determined passively, and it is now a characteristic of mature European thought to acknowledge this passive event as a bond. One does not choose where they are born, they emerge into and are shaped by a people, a nation, a form of life. And this entails that one is claimed before they can claim. They are made responsible for another before they could choose responsibility. Phenomenology testifies that being bound to and responsible for others precedes any right to self-assertion.
Nita, you say that this is not new, that the concern about the potential harm that can come from tinkering with the genetic code is really not new, and you say that people are sort of predispositioned to have a negative view of it because of our history in this country. Take us through that and tell us why this is either the same or different.
So I'll start by saying I think the techniques of today are very different than what I'm about to talk about. But if we go back in history to the late 1800s and the early 1900s, we have something called the American eugenics movement. And the American eugenics movement started with some scientists who were not terribly unlike our prominent scientists who are here with us today, who are incredibly well-intentioned, but who at the time really misunderstood the science. Starting with some really basic concepts of genetics, which some of you may have learned early in genetics classes, like Mendelian genetics, so the idea that traits are simply, that there's two characteristics of a trait or two alleles for a trait, and you inherit them just that simply, and every trait from eye color to everything else just has two little alleles, except traits are incredibly complex. And they thought, if this is true, if we have this kind of concept of heredity, then we should be able to breed much better populations. And we can do so through selective breeding by trying to encourage people who have what we think of as preferential traits to have children together. And we can, by doing so, get rid of some really undesirable traits, such as, and the ones they were really focused on were things like criminality, as if that's just one trait, or epilepsy, or imbecility. That was a really popular one, which is we just had to get rid of these imbeciles. And you can see this kind of progression here, which is different characterizations of imbecility that we just have to get rid of. And you might think this sounds crazy, and it does to us today, which is one of the safeguards we have against the kind of eugenic policies that we might go down. But as you'll see in some of the slides that now follow this one, there's a lot of things that were incorporated into this. So what happened is a lot of states started having better baby competitions where people would actually then have photographs of the multiple generations, which they measured by things like height or color of skin or color of hair. And it was used and incorporated to try to combat things like immigration policies, because people believed that immigrant populations were bringing bad traits into the population, or to try to increase the amount of sort of intelligence that they thought we might have in the population, and to decrease some of the more problematic traits.
If humans, then, are bound to others, Bonhoeffer envisions there being two responses to this reality, each displaying a particular form of freedom by freely choosing death. First, humans can assert the freedom of the self over against one's life community, nature, and history through self-chosen death, Selbstmord. This represents the freedom or liberation of the human form, all that bounds them by choosing death. Second, humans can sacrifice one's life for the other in responsibility. This practice witnesses to the gift of being bound to others in history, recognizing human freedom as the epitome of human life that can be given for others. Whereas self-mord becomes the consummation of life as self-assertion, sacrifice becomes the consummation of life as self-giving. This is the consummation of the thought of life as responsibility, as being bound to history and society, that this life has right only through sacrifice. This is a different mode of thought that witnesses to a different humanity in vision and practice. This is a humanity not determined by or destined to war and mechanization. It does not envision human life as gained through killing. It rather envisions human life as a belonging to others. Humankind lives through the sacrifice that the individuals and communities bring to it. Unsurprisingly, Bonhoeffer sees this practice of human freedom as founded and empowered by Jesus of Nazareth. He is the foundation and source of this human life. Jesus' self-giving grounds all current acts of human self-giving, and all current acts of self-giving further witness to an established human life in the here and now. Jesus fulfills the sacrifice of humanity, out of which alone humanity can live, and now, since the act of Golgotha, humanity lives entirely out of that act. His death sanctifies his life. His death and our death sanctify our life. And only when we become free to sacrifice for the holiest brotherhood of humanity, for whom the prophet from Nazareth, the Christ, died, only so do we become free for life. Just like the European-American mode of thought, this vision and practice of humanity precedes one's emergence into the world, but nevertheless determines human life as it is witnessed daily by the life and sacrifice of others. Bonhoeffer sees sacrificial self-giving as affecting renewal in how human life is valued and imagined in the West, through its forms of life. This practice extends through individuals to life communities and ultimately to nations. The practice of sacrifice transforms and witnesses to political life by the Spirit who is renewing humanity in the midst of death enacting patterns. The end of human beings, of humanity, is the readiness for this deed, for sacrifice for the fellow human being, and that is offered to the Spirit, who lives out of himself and creates life. This final section will consider how Bonhoeffer's own reflections illuminate the technologically situated humanity. Just as Bonhoeffer fixed his attention on the person devalued by economics, this portion attends to this human being enhanced. The modest contribution of this final section is to direct our attention to 3 points that aid our ongoing discernment of what it means to be human in light of enhancement technologies. First, neither enhancement technologies nor humanity can be considered in isolation. They implicate each other without being identical or inseparable. They are bound together by belonging to a mode of thought externalized in human action upon the body through enhancement technologies. In this regard, technologies are not neutral, and humans are not definable per se. Instead, both are best understood within the broader contextual and historical dynamics into which they emerge.
The big question is what kind of gods we will be. Will we be merciful and wise gods, or will we be petty, vengeful, and irresponsible gods?
With our biotechnology, artificial intelligence, and nanotechnology, it seems we possess all the ingredients to start our own process of creation. But how to deal with this? And what does it mean for our species? Those are big questions.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I think that this is going to be the agenda for the next century, is that we will be involved in deciding, either individually or as a society, who we want to be. What does it mean to be a human?
Bonhoeffer's analysis of the economically devalued human unveils the dynamics that the person is embodied within, allowing a more textured account of human life to emerge. And in our current analysis, Bonhoeffer's suggestion that war and technology are interrelated aids our contemporary reflection on enhancement technologies. If war and machine emerge from the same place, then it is unsurprising that their histories emerge and overlap as they do in DARPA, and this tells us something. To discuss enhancements, then, means to focus not only on the human body, important as that is, but also to focus on the context, practices, and desires of human communities, particularly in their relation to warfare and violent economic dynamics. As Philip Ziegler says, this discernment requires that we interrogate not only discrete enhancements which might be in view, but also the social practices, economic cultures, and political ideologies within which such enhancements are pursued, and out of which they arise. This is a way of emphasizing the irreducibly political character of our humanity. Persons are never isolated individuals, but they are born into and are formed in crucial ways by the communities in which they participate. Metaphysical approaches often conceal these dynamics, whereas Bonhoeffer's approach brings them to the forefront. To be sure, Bonhoeffer's analyses of these themes are generalized and require further development, but they helpfully uncover modern dynamics that are often intentionally obscured, and this uncovering helps direct substantive theological reflection moving forward. Second, Bonhoeffer's suggestion that humanness is not an abstract concept, but an imagined and practiced life has direct implications for how to understand and narrate human biological life. Bonhoeffer extends what Michael Banner has recently argued. Human being is a practice, not a theory, which is to say, agnosticism in this matter is an impossibility. The question, what is it to be human, is one to which we posit an answer day by day, for there is no way of living or dying which can be, practically speaking, undecided. Christianity asserts that to be human is to be with and for the other. That being, thus, is an achievement and not easily within our grasp. And yet, that this possibility is one which God's grace opens to us. The task of the Church is not just to give this answer to the world, but to display it.
The very idea of human being some sort of natural concept is really going to change.
Our bodies will be so high-tech, we won't be able to really distinguish between what's natural and what's artificial.
Inside our own heads is the most complex arrangement of matter in the known universe.
You might ask yourself, can we get to be superhumans?
This is not to deny the normative significance of human life. It is only to suggest that discerning this requires attending to particular practices, such as the practice of biological enhancement. This comes through in Bonhoeffer's bifurcation between the practices of self-chosen death, self-mord, and sacrifice, which provides a framework to interrogate enhancement technologies. Bonhoeffer identifies two opposing grammars connected to the same act, for example, accepting death. The former epitomizes an ethos of self-liberation and autonomy, the latter an ethos of free self-giving and boundedness to the other. The former treats the body as sheer materiality, as nature not theologically understood. The latter emphasizes how the body is gifted, good, as well as reconciled to God and others. Here, life with God is compatible with this limited bodily life, because Christ has assumed and redeemed this human life through his sacrifice. It is equally important to emphasize what these practices share in common, namely both deal with fallen humanity. Neither practice envisions humans as super peccatorum. Rather, the human's practices and life are fallen and thus open to transformation. The difference is that self-mord envisions transformation as individually seized via an act of self-transcendence, and sacrifice envisions transformation through God's self-giving, forming a new human community of life and self-giving unto death. Their imaginings of human biological life, then, differ in their relationship to God's reconciliation in Christ, which subsequently transforms human political life. They agree, however, that one's understanding of humanity is never static, but is constantly being discerned. This is particularly the case for Christian theology, since we do not inhabit Eden or first-century Palestine. We can reason only from this European-American civilization, and thus are ever looking for renewed visions of humanity that deepen our imaginings of the Christian life. The danger is that one can project an ideal concept of humanity that subsequently misses how Christ is forming one's humanity in unexpected ways. It is for this reason that attending to concrete human life aids contemporary discernment of what it means to be human in Christ. And it is for this reason that attending to human practices is so crucial, since it is in lived encounter and engagement with others that God often encounters and reveals what it means to live well in the midst of this world, thereby deepening our readings of what it means to be human. As Bonhoeffer says, Christ's death and our death sanctify our life, which is a way of emphasizing that any vision of human life is always in relation to one's reading of Scripture and one's encounter with the neighbor who witnesses to Christ.
Jacked in, cruising the net. Arasaka can use Soul Killer, an AI, to trap, fry, and pack away your psyche, your mind, and your soul. Following so far?
This leads us to the third point. Bonhoeffer's analysis refuses to discredit all enhancement technologies in advance, though it leaves the possibility open. Enhancements are not to be forbidden or embraced a priori. Rather, they can only be engaged within a weighted discourse on their ability to witness to and affirm the self-giving political life of fallen and redeemed humanity. Enhancements, then, cannot be quickly rejected because of their connection to war or the machine. If this were the case, all of our political, technological, and social life would be damned at this very juncture.
We are creating artificial intelligence, we are changing our genes. Are we building ourselves into gods, or are we building new gods?
We are doing both. History is messy. It's difficult to just bring it all into a single compartment. So we are moving along two simultaneous tracks. On the one hand, we try to enhance and upgrade Homo sapiens and give Homo sapiens divine abilities. At the same time, we are also creating new external gods like these big data algorithms. And part of the conflicts of the 21st century is going to be a conflict between these two new gods. Would it be the upgraded humans, or would it be the big data algorithms?
Contemporary life would only be condemning law without present promise, gospel, and our moral inquiry would be limited to securing limits and determining right uses for these technologies. It is better, then, to interrogate our technologies through the grammar of Christ and his humanity in a positive register. It is to look for the hope and promise in relation to these emerging technologies while rejecting any idolatrous attempt to envision these as the bearers of life. It is to engage these technologies not by asking how they can transcend this bodily life, but how our bodies can be put to the service of God and others, even with or through these technologies. This is an openness to the eschatological provisio of the gospel. For example, our bodies will be transformed, while avoiding the ever-prevalent temptation to project beyond this bodily life. As the Apostle Paul says, we look through a mirror dimly, and we cannot, as much as we try, clearly see, hear, or teach through the mirror with technological enhancements. 1 Corinthians 13:2. This explorative approach does not damn human life in the present. It does not wish to live in a different era when things were more straightforward. It rather embraces this moment as reconciled to God, and perhaps as a world come of age, allowing different modes of discourse to rise to the surface, which could renew our practice and vision of human life for today. In summary, Bonhoeffer's thought suggests the following conclusions about how to engage enhancement technologies. First, humanity can never be considered in isolation from enhancement technologies, since the two mutually implicate each other through their embeddedness in the ethos of a given polity and by how they overlap on particular human bodies. Second, imagining what it means to be human requires attending to human practices within their socio-political contexts, since being human is not an abstract concept but a lived reality. This suggests that engaging directly with enhancement technologies is necessary for a discerning whether they obfuscate or clarify Christ's presence in human lives. Bonhoeffer's description of the practices of self-chosen death and sacrifice offers a helpful theological framework for assessing enhancement technologies in day-to-day life. Third, Bonhoeffer's concrete approach discredits ideological approaches that reject enhancement technologies on an a priori basis. One must rather engage enhancement technologies by asking how or whether they affirm the goodness of bodily life in service to Christ. There is a continuous and provisional character to these acts of discernment. Admittingly, the conclusions developed here do not directly address whether particular discrete enhancement technologies distort or clarify human life. Nevertheless, Bonhoeffer provides a mode of engagement that assists in such discrete acts of discernment moving forward. Such an account ultimately maintains the open-ended and suggestive character of Bonhoeffer's reflections on the technologies that pervade and converge with human life. It likewise maintains Bonhoeffer's hope that God's disruptive presence will renew human life today. The open question moving forward is whether this renewal will be in conjunction with, or in spite of, the proliferation of enhancement technologies.